All right. Thanks for the 2 minute break. So, and we're back to the session. We just talked about the relevance of petroleum engineer as the other fields. We talked about how broad this subject is and not something very niche. Uh, and you mentioned that you are a mathematician first, and then you turn to and a person with physics acumen, and that's what helped you be a great petroleum engineer.
Yes.
So great food for thought for students who get into this field, because the problem, I think, so it's not a problem, but the mindset issue is we interact with a lot of students, and they actually look at it as if it's like drilling only, or that's only, and that's something that is
Yeah.
recursive. We've seen that again
Yes.
and again and again. They want to get into
Yes.
something called a core job. I don't think
Yes.
there is anything like core. Even in the core job, you will do non-core things.
Yes.
so
Yes. Yes.
so
Definitely.
the broadness has to be there. So that's a
Yes.
good food for thought coming from
Yes.
you. Like I said, I was mentioning this to you over messages as well, that everything that comes from you will be a stone written text for students, and they will follow that better, because we are of like they you understand what I'm trying to say. So coming back to more of the today's topics, there's a booming topic called CCUS,
Yeah.
carbon capture, and I personally have not that much of clarity on that subject, but I kind of have a good clarity on the reservoir engineering side of things, and that's the story for most of the petroleum engineers. So my question to you is, how would you explain CCUS to students like us, the students who have seen RE, who know reservoir physics and stuff, how to connect these two domains?
Yeah. Basically, it's a topic for a PowerPoint presentation. But
Right.
so, but nevertheless, I will make an attempt,
Yes.
and I would like to connect with reservoir engineering at the end of the day,
Yes.
because there is a connect with reservoir engineering, very, very serious connection with reservoir engineering. CCUS is a burning topic, and it is a need of the hour. We all realize that.
Mhm.
And basically, let me begin with the full form of CCUS is carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. Now, this carbon capture is something probably a little out of the E&P industry, because carbon capture is from the power plants. So it's basically a chemical engineer's domain. Then coming to utilization, yes, utilization, if that CO2 has to be literally dumped into a oil and gas depleted reservoir, then it is a utilization, because you are using that carbon dioxide and injecting it as a EOR method.
Mm.
So there is a philosophical problem there, because you inject CO2 one day or the other, it is going to come out.
Mm.
So what? So what kind of sequestration you are doing? Okay,
Yes.
so that is a little bit of a a little bit of a Zeno's paradox. But it is okay, because you can recirculate that produced gas CO2 back into the reservoir and keep on doing it, and you get a benefit. I mean, after all, CO2 is not getting wasted. CO2 is getting, and CO2 EOR is a fantastic technique.
Mhm.
Our own forgetting our own great petroleum engineer, who was the SP president. He shows a very fantastic case history. I'm just the name is slipping. He's from ISM. I'm just
So
slipping
that's
his
so.
name. No, no, he's the older generation. He
Okay.
was SP world president. So
Right.
he gave a fantastic example of a mature water flood, and the CO2 jumped the production by 3 or 4 folds. And it is a well documented case history where the recovery factors are approaching more than 70-75%.
Wow.
So that kind of thing are possible with CO2. So that is the utilization part of it.
Mhm.
Of course, there are other utilization techniques. People are trying to use it as a biomass also. But that is again a slightly different domain. And the last part is sequestration, is what is the topic for us to discuss. So
Yes.
it is a question of storing, and no better people than petroleum engineers, because we're in the we're in the business of injecting. Okay, whether it is
Mm.
injecting water, or whether it is injecting miscible gas, or whether it is, we are injecting polymer. So we are all familiar with injection, and injection means injectivity, and injectivity means relative permeability. So
Yes.
it all boils down to core lab to scal and all that. Secondly, there are basically four mechanisms where it is stored. One is the structural trapping, and that has something to do with our familiar G&G, our seismic data. There has to be a inverted structure, an anticline or some such thing, or even a stratigraphic trap will do.
Mm.
But on top, there has to be a cap rock. And a cap rock should have enough integrity, in the sense that once you have injected a lot of CO2 and the pressure builds up, because remember, this is something which we need to understand, that we are injecting fluid in a reservoir. So the pressure, I mean, if it is not a depleted oil and gas reservoir, and if it is a saline water aquifer, then the pressure is going to rise. So the pressure, when the pressure rises, then possibly the pressure rises to such an extent that it might fracture even the cap rock. And the whole objective in CCUS is to see that the carbon dioxide which we are injecting is permanently stored there, or permanently, in inverted commas, at least stored for a very long time. Okay, so this kind of thing is important. So one of the mechanisms is this structural mechanism, which needs a good understanding of the geometry of the reservoir. The second is the solubility, where the CO2 is getting dissolved into water, just like gas. Our hydrocarbon gas is dissolved in oil. So the same way CO2 is dissolved in water. So that has its own scale of time. And if there is by some means, there is some pressure reduction, then that gas will come out of solution again. So again, the objective of CCUS is to, at that extent, a little bit compromised. So that is the second mechanism of solubility. Third mechanism is of mineralization. That means when the CO2 is gone into it, then it forms formic acid, which reacts with the calcium carbonate and the silicates to produce bicarbonates, and these bicarbonates are mineralized. So that is another thing which is happening there. The only thing is, all this process takes a long time. It takes around something like 5,000 to 10,000 to 20,000 years of time, which is larger than the project time duration. And the last thing, which is the most important thing from a subsurface perspective, is capillary trapping. And capillary trapping is the place where you see all the three forces of reservoir engineering in action: the gravity force, the capillary force, and the viscous force. We always
Mhm.
talk of all these three concepts: capillary force, gravity force, and the viscous force. But many times we have only two of them in play. Like, for example, water cooling. It is simply the viscous force versus the buoyancy forces. Or if it is chemically enhanced oil recovery, it is viscous force versus the capillary force. But we rarely
Mhm.
see a case where it is a multipolar world. Okay, so now you have a multipolar world. You have all the three forces: the gravity, the capillary, and the viscous forces into action. Now how? So when you are injecting CO2 into a saline water, this is basically a drainage process. Okay,
Mm.
so you are having a water saturated reservoir, and you are injecting
Yes.
gas into it. It is akin to migration of oil in a water bearing reservoir. So that
Mhm.
process is a drainage process. So the drainage relative permeability curves are in action. Now, as the CO2 moves into the reservoir, there is a difference between the gravity, the density of the CO2 and water. And because of this density difference, the CO2 goes up. And because it is going up, therefore there is a co-current flow here. And again, this is drainage process. But once you stop the injection process, then you see that there is a counter current flow. The water, being heavy, starts falling down against CO2. So now the water is actually imbibing into the pores which are CO2 filled. So you
Okay.
have an imbibition mechanism which is taking place. Okay, it is similar to what happens in a oil water transition zone. In an
Mm.
oil water transition zone, when you put a well on production, initially, of course, it is the drainage, capillary pressure, and drainage relative permeability curves which are governing the whole situation. But as you progress, It is the imbibition one, because you have a moving contact and you have a moving water which is ingressing into the oil reservoir. So you have that force into and you can accurately model that, provided you take care of the hysteresis involved in this, and the hysteresis in the relative permeability curves and in the capillary pressure curves. So you need to understand that for characterization of CCUS, you need a good scale, and that good scale should have water and CO2 relative permeability curves, water and CO2 capillary pressure curves. These are the minimum data information that you need to have. Uh, with that, you will be able to predict how much gas is actually trapped. And now the beauty of that is that that gas trapped will remain long into the reservoir, because it will be immobilized, and because it is immobilized, you will actually achieve the objective of trying to capture the gas. So capillary trapping is the ultimate, and to achieve capillary trapping, you need to understand the interplay between the gravity force, the viscous force, and the capillary force.
Right.
So in nutshell, this is the basic reservoir engineering into that. And personally, I have no experience because we have not done it here. It's all from literature only. But there are a couple of projects which are going on. This, the biggest one is, of course, the Sniper one in Norway, where they have successfully done this. And as the world learns, I think we will also have to one day or the other do it. And there will be a lot of cost involved in that, and there has to be a government compensation for that. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for the petroleum industry to entirely take the burden of all the costs, etc. But
Right.
then this is the technology which is coming up in a big way, and we must all gear up to understand all the niceties of it. Basically, there's the interplay of the imbibition and drainage, so we need to understand the hysteresis part very nicely to get into the whole aspect. And of course, the reservoir heterogeneities and the buoyant forces will always play a role, because CO2 is a very funny fluid. It has a very low critical temperature and critical pressure, so it becomes liquid at a very early stage. So that is why we need to be very much vigilant on that. So that is what I wanted to share with you. Yeah.
Understood, sir. Jayesh, you were saying something? Yeah.
Yeah. So, sir, as you talked about that, you currently, after the retirement, you are doing a lot of coding and also started to use Python. So, I would like to ask if you want to share some of the projects that you have done by using Python of oil and gas industry or energy industry.
Yes, I'm very much open to do that. Only thing is, I am not very sure how I can do it. Maybe I can do
Just
it through
sharing
GitHub.
the GitHub link. I'll share with the audience. If you want to share the screen for like few minutes. But that's okay. We
I have
can
not
do that.
come prepared. I can just tell you briefly
Yeah,
what I
the
have done.
ideas.
Yeah.
I can tell you.
Just the ideas.
And definitely, I am ready to share with the audience. In fact, I can have a one-to-one session also if
Great.
on specific topics. So definitely we can do it. One of the pioneering thing which I tried, because this was a revisit after my initial experimentation with numerical differentiation of lab data. Now that water flood experiment from a core. Okay.
Right.
We had very difficult time, because our crude is very nice. Our crude is light oil. We have no problems with that, and our crude is not at all waxy. There are a lot of places where the crude is waxy, and it is far more complicated problem. But even without that, to get to numerical differentiation of the water cut data is a hard job. Okay. And the direct method of determining relative permeability curves heavily relies on this. So what we have done is a machine learning approach. We have said that the relative permeability curves are going to be parameterized by the Corey exponents, which is a fairly decent approximation, although not the best one, but still a fairly decent one. People might, as a next step, try a spline, or maybe do something Corey plus something, which is also possible. But Corey is what we started with. So we have only two exponents, n and m. And with that, we just do a Buckley-Leverett model of the core displacement process, and predict what should be the water cut, and what should be, if required, the delta P across the core. But we are not requiring that. I mean, if it is there, that will be an additional data and will be always helpful. But even if you don't have that data, it's still fairly well enough. You run hundreds of models and train your model on the water cut, or basically a complete performance history up to a given pore volume injected, let's say 5 or 10, and run some hundreds of times and generate your training data set, then apply a neural network, do it on a test data set, and from your experimental data, then it will invert and get you back the values of N and M, the exponents of the Corey's exponent for oil and Corey's exponent for water. And it will not stop at that. It will also give you a confidence interval for what is the confidence interval on N and M. Now, I believe this is for a lab data. Okay. I believe this can be definitely and very much definitely extended to the field data, where you observe the field water cut, and what you're trying to answer is what is the underlying relative permeability curve for that particular well or for that particular region. Anyone who has done simulation models, he will deal with 50 relative permeability curves. And to be honest, when I took my first course in relative permeability curve, I was taught by a very great expert. And the very simple thing he told us is that relative permeability curve is a number between 0 and 1. I agree with him. I agree with him. I fully agree with him, because this is what a practical simulation engineer does. He does it to his advantage. He tries to match history with a number between 0 and 1. Because the core data is of no use. Obviously, it is some 5, 10, 15 cores which are of no use. Okay. Whereas if you look at a well's response, a well's water cut response, then that is an integrated relative permeability curve for an entire well domain. It has a lot of meaning. And I recently heard an SPDL on this from a guy from Petronas, where they worked out a well-wise fractional flow curve. And that fractional flow curve had an SW part. Now, the beauty of that, which is the thing which I cannot duplicate the way you tell that, try and get the paper done again, is how to get this SW. Because in a field, getting a field-wide SW means you have to go back to some kind of simulation. Okay. But CRM comes to our help. And CRM tells me what is the connectivity between a given producer and a given injector. So I can work out what is the pore volume in that particular producer, and I can work out what is the saturation for that. And so I will be doing a simulation without actually doing a simulation, but the simulation will be based only on FWSW and no partial differential equations. So you will end up, and this is for a mature water flood. I mean, I'm talking of a mature water flood with no free gas, with only oil and water and well compensated pressures. So if that is the case, then you can run a proxy simulator. And that is what machine learning is all about. Yes. I mean, why do all that and basically come out with meaningful solutions for what should be the saturation profile 5 years from now? So we can answer these kind of questions, and we can do a good job on prediction. So that is one thing which I'm planning to work slowly on that. Then I have developed some 1D models on a continuous polymer and a continuous ASP flood, which again helps the lab man to understand what exactly is happening as he injects the polymer. And I'm telling you, the slug problem is quite tough. And this is basically based on fractional flow theory. And our great man, Gary Pope, has written a paper in 1980, which does exactly the same problem for a slug. And it's a very fantastic mathematical problem. I'm going to attempt it, but right now I'm restricted to continuous polymer or continuous surfactant flooding on a Python routine, and it works very nicely. It works pretty good, and it gives you the kind of results that you want to see. Finally, I have done my streamline model also, which solves the elliptic partial differential equation. Right now it is on 2D, and it tracks the streamlines based on what is known as a Pollock's algorithm, which was developed early in 1980s in the groundwater area. And it's a very nice way of tracking the flood front as well as the streamline in a heterogeneous reservoir. And my other versions of my streamline model are restricted to a homogeneous reservoir, where I'm simply using the superposed log R solution and superposing it. So that is possible only for a homogeneous reservoir. But if the reservoir is having heterogeneity, and you define the heterogeneity, and that is the biggest challenge, because defining heterogeneity that is a second issue which is very important. But having defined the heterogeneity, you can always predict what the flat front will look like, and that model is ready on a 2D. I'm working on a 3D version also, but 2D is ready. So this is in brief what I've done for the last 3-4 years, and still struggling. There's a lot of new things coming, so we'll pick up as it goes on.
One thing I would like to say, Jayesh, before you ask anything else is, so one thing that I've personally struggled with and a lot of students struggle with is
Yes.
trying to you know, we learn Python, we do things, recreate things in from books. There are a lot of papers also that you just mentioned about. I love recreating papers,
Yes.
but
Yes.
we want someone like you to guide us that, hey, if you do this problem, you are actually solving the industry issue. If you're trying to do this, you are actually doing that, because yes, now we know Python to a good extent. We want to utilize our limited time to the help of the industry, not just recreating for the sake of it. So sir, I think my request would be to you to agree to maybe further sessions where you talk to us about sharing your screen and Pythonic implementations of the impactful projects that can be done. So that I just wanted to add this. You were saying something.
Yeah, applications that are helpful.
At the end of the day, my only take is on this is the following: that whatever you are doing is transparent. It is not done by you alone. Anybody else can run your Python program. It is not mumbo jumbo. It is not black magic. First thing. Second thing is, it is giving you a numerical component to everything that you are doing. It is giving you barrels of oil per day.
Right.
And that counts. That counts to the management. And every time they don't have to look to a purchase simulation model. Why should they? I mean, that is my problem. Okay.
Yes.
And spend years and months of making a simulation model whose utility is not more than 6 months, because 6 months later the history match is out. So if you have your own model, you have a convincing power that, look, my Koenig model said this well will have this water cut at this time. Look, it is having this water cut. So I have faith in my model. So I say that 3 years down the line, it will have this water cut. If you reperforate and go to the top part, that is the kind of confidence that you have on a model which you can give to anybody, whether he's a geologist or whether he's a petroleum engineer or whether it is a mechanical engineer. He will understand the whole issue.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So as many freshers will be watching this video, so from their point of view, I want to ask that what do you look in a candidate when you are interviewing for a fresher position? What do you look in that candidate?
Great question.
A great question, but unfortunately, I don't have any experience on that. I have not had.
But what type of advice you would like to give?
Yeah, certainly. As I said, one has to keep his antenna wide open. One has to see the undercurrents. I think most students have access to SP. And fortunately, every year nowadays, SP is putting on excellent distinguished lectures. They should not miss it before. I mean, they should try and understand what is being said, because by the time you come to 4th year, you know most of the stuff. Okay. So my point is that they should go with a broader mind. They should try to understand what the world is going on around, and keep at the back of the mind that they are in an industry where the oil equation is at the back of working all the time. Cost revenue. Okay. So whatever action you do, it has to have a bearing on this cost revenue fulcrum. Okay. So that is what is my advice to the youngsters, that go with a broad mind, go with an open mind, be inquisitive. And I have found many youngsters quite inquisitive. They are monitoring a EOR field, and the young engineer asked me, I don't know why my polymer is going 3 steps ahead, bypassing 3 wells. Now, what can I tell? I don't think a numerical simulation model will be able to exactly duplicate this situation unless you do some hanky-panky on the relative, on the permeability. Okay. So, but this kind of observation he is making. So he is going with observation. And the observation part is very important. And he just cannot brush it down the carpet. So as a conscientious worker, they should go with try to understand what exactly the field is telling. The field is always telling everything, so we should listen to that.
Right. Very insightful, sir. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And also, sir, earlier as you talked about that you also worked on a lot of simulation tasks. So as a reservoir engineer, what would you prefer more, or what would you like to convey the coming reservoir engineers more, that they should know reservoir simulation softwares or the mathematics behind the simulation process?
Very
Because I have
interesting
seen some
question.
are saying that I don't know petrol and many simulation softwares. So knowing the mathematics behind the simulation process, is that
Yeah,
a better approach? Or...
there are two components to this answer. One component is that yes, we should all know how to run the black box. True, we should know, but at the end of the day, we should realize that is a black box, and we don't know what exactly is going on inside. There is a huge data requirement. You read all kinds of functions, and many times you are at a loss to give these functions. So what happens is you end up, when you run a simulation model, and I have experienced that, you end up with results which are not according to your conscience.
Right.
Now that troubles you. That troubles you. You know, for example, I have experimented with a oil rim reservoir, gas cap on top, bottom water, active bottom water, not active bottom water, a weak bottom water, and people wanted me to run a water flood and see what happens. Now my model would faithfully give me an incremental oil in an offshore context. Now, do I really buy that? Because this is not what is likely to happen. Whatever you inject would go and fall into the aquifer. So my point is that when you are using the model as a black box, don't get carried away with it. Basically, ask the model to do what you want him to do. Okay, in a sense, it's a little dishonest. I agree, but at the same time, as a reservoir engineer, by the time you run the programs, you have enough experience to understand what exactly is happening. Like there is another hypothetical situation. I have seen many small fields with gas caps, oil rims, and active water drive. And one sweet day, the gas cap starts producing clean oil. There is no answer on a simulation model for this, but this happens. This has happened. And I don't think a conventional simulation model has an answer to this. That the migrated oil is producible. See, we are always taught that migrated oil is not producible, and we would avoid situations where the migrated oil will go into the gas cap. But there are situations where this has happened, and these gas caps are not small gas caps; they are pretty good gas caps. So we cannot totally rely on the black box. We have to put in a judgment factor, and we should not allow ourselves to get carried away with the model, but try to see that the model gives you what you want rather than get driven by the model. This is part one of the answer. Part two of the answer is when you are yourself writing a simulation software, at least a bit and part. Then you are in full control. You know what are the assumptions, you know what are the problems. I think those things you can be driven by the model. Okay, roughly. That's what I would submit here, and I would prefer people to do that on a transparent basis. One good source is now MRST, but then you have to develop enough MATLAB expertise in that. I don't have that expertise, but I would love to get that, and it is a really good thing to happen in the industry. It's an open source model and very good one.
Right. glad that you mentioned MRST, sir, because
MRST.
Yes,
I
yes,
was
yes,
I
yes,
was on an expedition to recreate that in Python. I failed terribly,
yes, yes, yes.
but
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
I started doing
But it
that.
is to be attempted. I will be with you to make that happen.
Now I feel
Definitely.
more confident.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yes, sir.
Great,
So
great.
so great answers, sir. Jayesh, anything you want to ask or add?
Yeah, just one last question.
Sure.
So, sir, as we talked about a lot of AI, ML, and digitalization thing also. So,
Yeah.
my question is, how is the take of oil industry people with the introduction of this AI, ML, new technology in the industry? Because in my past experience also, so I have encountered some of the people who do not rely on the AI, ML techniques, that they kind of think that
Mhm.
this is nothing, this is a black box type of model. It cannot help us in getting the good results as compared to conventional methods. So what is your take on this particular thing? Because according to me, what I think that with coming time, there is a lot of data increase in every industry, not in oil and
Yes,
gas industry.
yes,
So
yes,
why
yes.
why not taking the advantage of this particular thing?
Yes, there is a certain amount of slowness in adopting this technology at the highest levels, but I'm seeing a gradual shift happening already,
Hmm.
and a good shift.
Hmm.
It has of course started with the subsurface disciplines, uh, and to a great extent also with drilling. And I am really very happy to note that, because drilling is the most capex involving expenditure in the industry.
Mhm.
And uh, and AIML based lithology prediction for drilling is a wonderful aid. I don't think any management will shy away from that. And I'm seeing that people are definitely slowly gathering to do that. In fact, this is what I would like to compliment Divyanshu to say that the petroleum engineer is not a reservoir engineer alone. He is also a production engineer. He's also a drilling engineer. He's also a subsurface man. So the kind of advances that are happening in the AIML field, in the field of drilling, are really stupendous and marvelous. So I see a very good bright future for this with digitalization also. But of course, these things are slow and would take its own time. But definitely it would come. Definitely it would come.
Okay.
Particularly in the field of subsurface and surface, and
Hmm.
also drilling. Yes, yes.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for the great answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, my comment to that would be looking at it from the other angle, from a
Yes.
student's angle. It's a very positive side that the industry is slow, because that makes us good candidates to learn
To
from the other
learn. Yes,
industries
yes,
and
yes,
bring to
yes,
our industry,
yes,
and makes
yes,
you more hireable. So good
yes,
motivation for freshers
yes,
if you are in your
yes,
third and fourth year. And I will try
yes.
to keep on chasing Marathe sir on trying to
Sure.
share his projects. I am a very good candidate on chasing. so
Yes, yes.
so I
Great,
will
great.
I will
Definitely.
keep on bringing
My
projects
pleasure.
from Marathe
Yes,
sir to you as
yes.
students. And like I told you, sir, this is a session that I wish I had when I was in my college, because this is the insights that we did not have at least 5 years in our engineering, which means 4 years plus one after our engineering. So this is very important that students take note of this. And yeah, I mean, we've extracted a lot of your time, just like a
No, no.
heavy oil reservoir.
No,
But
it was my pleasure. It was my great pleasure, Divyanshu. And from day one that I know you, I know how deeply committed you are to all this. And a
thank you,
keen
sir.
watcher of petroleum from scratch. I probably have not missed much of it, and would love to definitely revisit some of your podcasts. They are very great. So much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So
Thank
Jayesh
you.
himself,
Thank you.
me and Jayesh, we connected because Jayesh
Thank you.
is a
Yes.
huge physics freak,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I like
Great.
going into the
Great.
math. So our team
Yes.
is kind of, two of our teammates are working with ONGC, and they were very
That's great.
excited when I shared that Marathe sir has
Uh-huh.
agreed. They were very happy
Great.
to see that. So
Absolutely.
looking forward to more sessions, sir. I cannot
Thank
be satisfied
Yes,
with 2
yes,
sessions.
yes.
I'll chase
No,
you.
definitely.
And
Yes, sure.
yep, thanks for this wonderful session. I think I concluded all the questions ranging, and I
Yes,
would like to give a concluding remark that the industry has to learn from this giant experience. The fact that the impact can be generated from simple concepts as well. You don't
yes,
have to go directly to the huge concepts, complicated stuff.
yes,
Marathe sir's experience has told you that baseline models kept on helping him throughout his
yes,
career. Coding kept on helping him throughout his career,
yes,
and the best thing that I see is even after achieving so much, he's still trying to learn the current trends of the industry. Where I don't see a reason. There is nothing forcing you to do that, but you're
no,
still following that passion. So I would really want to cultivate in my life, and I would want every student to not shy away. If you're not getting placed in your college curriculums right now, it's a placement season for a lot of students. Don't worry about it. We are going to bring a lot of search projects for you, and we'll make sure that you know the great Rajendra Marathe's projects. And if the industry does not hire
most
you,
welcome. Yes,
they
yes.
lost.
No,
So
no,
thank you, sir.
most welcome.
Thank you for
Thanks.
your time. Looking forward to more sessions. Thank you, Jayesh,
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
very much.
Thank you, sir,
Thank you,
for
Thank you.
Jayesh.
thank you.
Thank you,
Great
Jayesh.
session, sir.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Divyanshu. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, sir.
Thank you.